Good afternoon, Scott Baker. I think this is going to be a fun one.
Yeah, absolutely, Mikey. The question for you, the question for me, the question for everybody that's joined us for Lead Better: are you an independent thinker? And the real test of this is what you kind of put right into one of the social media posts, which is if someone just had to gauge you, right? They didn't know anything else about you, but they were going to say, "What's your age? What's your leadership position? Let's maybe your salary. How about your political party? Just your zip code." Could they then predict your beliefs across personal, social, organizational topics, maybe political topics, maybe religious topics? What would they know about you from those things? And would you line up and be like, "Yeah, that's pretty much me," or would you be like, "No, I think you're just scratching the surface. There's a lot more there"?
Now, marketers think that they've already figured this out.
Okay.
Down to a range of about a 4 household quadrant. So
Okay.
the way that you buy space in over-the-top programming on ads, you're basically buying that space in neighborhoods that have a tendency to be broken up in very small cohorts, down to like 4 to 8 houses, right? And so marketers think they know exactly.
I'm looking around at my neighbors here to kind of be like, how much am I like that guy over there?
That's the exact way that I think about it as well. Like, I'm very different from my neighbor. I'm very different from that neighbor. But the way that marketers are thinking of it is like, if I get a 25% response rate on the ad that I'm serving up to these 4 houses, that's actually a really great response rate, right?
Yeah, right.
But they're breaking it down on a very small. So I think that as you're making those decisions, you really are making them based on a socioeconomic kind of idea. Like, where they live is going to predict what their voting habits are. What their salary is going to be determined by their home value. And so a lot of things are determined just by your street address.
Yeah.
And I hate the idea that people feel like they got me figured out. And so
I'm not even sure. I don't even know if I'm sure how much you're like your own wife. Like, I think there's a lot of variation here.
Right.
So now we're gonna go through the pieces of this field note. I beyond just the marketing and psychographics and all the rest of that. I have some things where it's not a disagreement here, but I have a real thing that I want to talk through with you in terms of like, well, is the real side of independent thinking just kind of just taking everything case by case, or not buying into the party line on this and being evaluative? Is it just that, or is it more than that? So I'd like you to everybody to kind of hang with this discussion. But the original sort of impetus in the field note around this is leaders are all the time kind of making calls on things, and they've got to have an opinion, a perspective. They've got to they're getting a filter of all of that. And so the question is, and the challenge of the field note is, it's not to be predictable. Don't just like listen to the voices. Okay, yeah, I'm going to go along with this. This is how we do it. But to encourage you to say, I'm going to think independently here. And what does that look like? How do I separate sort of the pressure of the moment and all the voices in the crowd to kind of say, well, maybe my perspective is different than everyone's? Then there's the question of trusting your own judgment. Is this really true, right? So that is obviously a very important thing for a leader, to be the kind of person that is seen as someone who has a rigorous mind, right?
Yes. And sometimes you can see that based upon the room you're standing in. I think the illusion in the early part of the field note is to like, how do you respond in front of famous people might say a lot about whether or not you're an independent thinker or not. If you have the tendency to be starstruck, then that might mean that whatever the skills here are behind becoming a more independent thinker might need to be worked on a little bit more if you are starstruck in a room of celebrities. And if you're able to kind of maintain that and it not like sway your thinking or sway your opinion, right, then that's a different thing. Now, that's a very different thing, like when you're in a conversation with a famous person. Like, how do you defer to the people who seem to have the loudest voice in the room? Is a very different equation as to how you actually are going to act when it comes to a decision time, when that person's opinion is weighing heavy on you. Like, there's all kinds of things in here.
And by the way, you can substitute celebrity for your leader even. So the field note is a challenge to leaders to be independent thinkers. But even in a team, how independent are you going to be when the leader or this leader or three of them, they think this, but you're like, I'm not so sure.
Yeah.
And we know that this happens just psychologically. And I made a reference to this maybe a week or two ago, which is if the president of the company or the owner of the company or your boss is in a room and there's 50 people and they tell a joke and everybody really laughs and inside you're going, that wasn't that funny.
Yeah.
And in fact, if Susie told that joke, no one would be laughing.
Right.
But somehow if this guy tells it or she tells it, they're like, ha, 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 ha. Because everybody's like, I got to make it look like I'm going along with what the boss thinks is funny or exciting, or this is our big new endeavor. Yeah, great. But what if you don't think that? Now, if you're always a naysayer, you don't get a prize for just being negative all the time, right? There has to be a way to find a solution here. So now here's my question, and we can decide how much time to spend on it. This field note is saying, reject just kind of the trends of our time to be like social proof or kind of like, I want to be with the hip crowd of where things are going. And so there's just lots of copycat ideas. Oh yeah, everybody's doing this, so our company should do this. And so it's encouraging you to do that, right? To be independent of that. But I do think that there is value. And this is where it comes from. You tell me how this sits with you. I've heard lots of people say, well, I don't believe in this particular political party, religious belief, educational framework, because I try to evaluate everything on its own merits. Mm-hmm. Okay, fair enough. But most of the great thinkers over all of history tended to have a worldview of some sort that was based on a certain set of presuppositions. Might have been aesthetic, might have been philosophical, might have been theological, but they set a framework that actually allows them to function because they're not reinventing the entire universe of things to pay attention to when the issues of the day come before them.
Yes.
Right? So what they're doing is, as this comes in and this comes in, this comes in, they already have built a framework. Doesn't mean that it's unchangeable, right? It could evolve over time, but it's more than just, I live in this zip code and I drive this kind of car and I wear these kind of clothes. So my question is, can you have a sophisticated, well thought out worldview around business, around education, whatever your field is, that you use to filter? In fact, it's made you who you are and why you're great, and still be independent. How does that mix?
Yeah, it's tough to say the phrase that you said that kind of sets you apart and try to understand what is the mental framework that allows you to arrive at that. Mm-hmm. Because part of me wants to know, are you saying you're an independent thinker because you know that that's the popular thing to say?
Yeah, it is. Right. There is a little bit like, yes, right. It's exactly falling into that trap, which is, well, I don't vote this, I vote this, or I see this way and not that way. Right. And
well,
you're like,
if you understand that there's an issue with hierarchy, it mm-hmm. doesn't necessarily mean that hierarchy is bad, because mm-hmm. at some point you're just like, you need to reevaluate where you have the things that allow your everyday decision-making process to have that hierarchy in there. And then that needs to be traded out, but it doesn't mean that hierarchy is bad. So it's really kind of, and it also, another thought that comes to mind is the idea is like, where are your experts? Because at some point you can't just become an expert on everything. And this is the type mm-hmm. of thing that leaders will struggle with.
Yes, right.
They grow up in an organization that now I'm leading, a division that it's two teams. I'm over sales and marketing, but I came up through sales. And now I'm overseeing marketing as well, but I don't really know marketing all that well. So I have to become an expert on marketing. So if you know that you're going to be predisposed to sales, but marketing is something that you need to become an expert at, mm-hmm. you need to kind of rethink about how it is that I actually become an expert in all things. And the way that many admired leaders do it is with the idea of being a collector of people instead of a collector of ideas, right? So it's where who are your experts? Where are your experts lying? And then once you've established like, okay, these are my experts, how you arrange like the tumbling down of like whose opinion is more important as I'm moving down, that's something that can be adjusted, but you could trade in and out your experts as well at wheel, but the pressure of you always being the expert on everything is there's no way for you to be able to do that.
Right. And I actually think that one of the things that we would say, and see if there, I'm posing lots of just challenges for you, Mikey, to decipher the meaning of life on this. We often say that in the admired leadership worldview, that we have a lot of sort of counterintuitive takes on things against the sort of popular feelings or popular literature on leadership. And we would say, but that's not actually how it seems to work. And when we look at the best leaders, this is what we see. And we think that when this happens and you do this, then this happens. People go, oh my gosh, you're right. That's amazing. And we're like, yeah, that's why we're independent thinkers. We didn't follow the crowd on all of that. Now, what happens then is if you say, let's say you became a master of admired leadership behaviors, and there's hundreds of them, and you had this sort of, and there's some foundational things, but you had that as your filter, right? This is sort of your world view on leadership. That actually is the thing that gives you the foundation to be fairly independent, but it might actually be consistent with your own worldview. Right? Yes. It might make you different than the rest of your zip code or different than the rest of the executive team. But you're saying when I'm presented with this case situation or we have to make this decision, it's not like you're being like, well, I'm just going to forget about the entire decision module in or relationship module or whatever it is in admired leadership, and I'm going to go with this. I think it actually gives you a greater foundation. So I want to encourage people to be independent thinkers, but I think you can do it from some level of consistency. Right. So and that would be my hope, that people wouldn't read this field note and say, well, I guess if I'm just always surprising people with my viewpoints, then that'll show that I'm independent. The value here is not just being, crazy in the sort of schizophrenia of the positions you take, that you might stand against what other people are talking about, and you're showing, well, this is why, and this is why. And I've always believed this, and one of my teachers used to say this, and you fit it into something and you hold to that. I think then you've got a pretty powerful case. That's the kind of thinker that you want to follow.
Right. Now I've got a conundrum back at you.
Okay.
I'm not sure that, the way that the field note reads, leaders who push an independent thinking mindset throughout their organizations tend to be rewarded with higher engagement and ownership over problems. But you're inviting a lot more issues into your team by having a group that is entirely independently thinking, because now the way you explain things has to accommodate for the fact that everybody's an independent thinker. So if you were actually going to choose, you have a team of 10, right? How many of those people do you actually want to be independent thinkers? I think there's room in there for you as a leader to be like, I want 3 of them to not be independent thinkers, right? Because when I say, like, I just kind of want to get things done, so let's not spend too much time arguing over this kind of thing. I want at least 3 people who are just going to put their heads down and do the work.
Well, I would suggest maybe you can't have 3, 6, 8 people all trying to create their own culture.
Right.
The organization has its own sort of foundational reasons for existing. It has its own sort of capacities for why it seems to be better than its competitors in many other areas. It has certain sort of strategies and based on values and the way that they interact with the kind of clients that they have. There's a consistency there. What you're looking for is you don't want people who are just complacent or just doing the thing because this is the way we've always done it, or we're doing it this way because our competitor down the street does it. So you do want to create, as the field note is saying, a culture where we're saying, I as the leader, you as the team member, the new person we're hiring, that we're saying we want clear thinking, vigorous thinking that isn't afraid to challenge some preconceptions. But I think it has to be grounded. I think it has to be grounded in some sort of worldview and some sort of consistency. And so then I think you get the best of both worlds, because you're always going to be trying to kind of refresh. If you get too much order, then it just gets stultifying. You get too much chaos, you're not going to have any progress. So this independent thinking is the thing that refreshes and brings in the new and allows you to see the adjacent possibles of where you can go.
Right. Now, do you know in pop culture the built-in insult that talks about what this is? Have you heard of being an NPC?
Yeah, I was about to make a joke that I had no idea what you're talking about, but I actually do what the NPC is. Yeah.
Yeah, so my kids talk about that all the time. And so when we're out in public, when we're having a dinner together, I was like that invariably someone will be like, that guy up at the counter is totally NPC, right? And it's like it's not necessarily insulting, but it is one of the most like biggest digs that they could give a stranger. And they don't ever say it to their face, but they come back to the family and there's 8 of us like, that guy's totally he's on a script and he cannot get off of it, right?
Right.
And so there is some of that talk that's already going on that says, try to figure out how to get yourself off script every now and then, even among the kids.
Well, and then you have the counter meme, which is, there's a lot of main character energy going on in this one, right? And maybe you just need there's probably a little truth in all of that. So look, in the end, what's your takeaway on this? Like, how do you mix that blend of a consistency, something that has been a world view or a intellectual sense that's been built with diligence, but yet isn't afraid to take the unpopular or unconventional stand?
Yeah. Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway for me is that sometimes when it feels like I'm going along to get along, I still know what I think, right? There's a difference between, you didn't push back in this case. Well, I did that because I'm choosing to flex in this moment. So it feels like I'm not independent thinking here, but I do know what I'm thinking. And I know that, we just need to move forward in this moment instead of me stepping up and saying something. So the behaviors of where independent thinking actually shows up and how they show up, you might have a lot more independent thinkers on your team than you realize. You're just squelching conversation.
Well, and then the other thing that's really what we wanted to underline all along, which is there's one sign of the true independent thinkers. It's not even mentioned in the field note. But it's true in consistency as we look at great leaders around the world. They watch and listen to lead better. That's the marker of whether they're a great independent thinker.
I haven't checked the number of countries this year so far in the last 6
good.
days.
Let's do that. Okay.
So I'm not sure if we're at 183, but we'll report the next time we get together.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Mikey.
Right. Bye now.